I still remember the exact moment those careless words left my mouth, because if I could relive one afternoon in my life, it would be that one. We were standing in the checkout line at the neighborhood grocery store, laughing over something completely ordinary. She had just turned down another invitation from a coworker who had been trying to set her up with someone. I shook my head, grinned, and teased, "At this rate, you'll be single forever." I expected her to laugh. Instead, she looked down at the shopping basket in her hands, her cheeks turned pink, and after a long silence she whispered, "That depends on you." The world didn't stop. Cars still drove past outside. The cashier kept scanning groceries. Someone's child cried near the bakery. But inside me, everything changed. For 3 years, I had believed Emily and I were simply best friends. Apparently, only one of us had been pretending. I met Emily on one of the worst days of my life. My father had passed away unexpectedly, and I had spent weeks barely functioning. Work felt meaningless. Friends didn't know what to say. Every conversation ended with awkward silence. Then one rainy Tuesday, I wandered into the small community library just to escape the weather. Emily worked there. She noticed I kept walking through the same aisle without picking a book. Instead of asking what I wanted, she simply handed me a mug of coffee. "You don't look like someone searching for books," she said gently. "You look like someone who needs 5 quiet minutes." She wasn't wrong. We sat near the window while rain tapped against the glass. She never asked painful questions. She simply listened whenever I felt ready to talk. Sometimes kindness isn't loud. Sometimes it's just someone refusing to let you feel alone. After that day, we became friends. Real friends. She celebrated my promotions more than I did. She brought soup whenever I caught the flu. She helped my elderly neighbor rake leaves every fall without anyone asking. She remembered birthdays everyone else forgot. When homeless veterans gathered near downtown during winter, she'd quietly leave blankets and hot meals before sunrise. She never posted about it online. In fact, I only learned because one veteran thanked her while we were walking together. Emily smiled awkwardly and quickly changed the subject. Helping people wasn't something she did for attention. It was simply who she was. Looking back, I don't know how I missed what was right in front of me. Maybe I was afraid. Maybe I thought someone as kind as Emily deserved someone extraordinary. I certainly didn't think that person could be me. The day she admitted her feelings, I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't care. Because I suddenly realized how much I did. I need some time, I finally said. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes gave away the disappointment. "Of course," she replied. "I'd rather have an honest answer than a rushed one." That's who Emily was. Even when her own heart was on the line, she protected mine. Over the next week, everything reminded me of her. The coffee shop where she always ordered peppermint tea. The bookstore she'd convinced me to visit. The park where we'd spent hours feeding ducks while talking about absolutely nothing. Then something happened that answered every question I'd been avoiding. A powerful storm swept through our town. Trees crashed onto roads. Electricity disappeared across several neighborhoods. The local community center became an emergency shelter. When I arrived to volunteer after work, I expected to see dozens of people helping. Instead, I saw Emily already there. She had been there since 6 that morning. She organized donated clothes. She comforted frightened children. She translated for an elderly immigrant couple who couldn't understand the emergency announcements. When one exhausted volunteer burst into tears after working 12 straight hours, Emily quietly hugged her and insisted she take a break. Not once did she complain. Not once did she ask for recognition. Late that evening, I found her sitting outside on the shelter steps, finally taking a 5-minute rest. She looked exhausted. "You should go home," I said. She smiled. "So should you." Neither of us moved. A little boy suddenly walked outside carrying a worn teddy bear. "Miss Emily?" "Yes?" "My mom says thank you." Emily knelt until they were eye level. "You tell your mom she doesn't owe me thanks." He frowned. "Why?" "Because someday you'll help someone else. Then we'll be even." The boy nodded seriously. "I will." He hugged her before running back inside. I stood there speechless. That tiny conversation said more about Emily than anything else ever could. She wasn't trying to save the world. She was trying to make sure kindness kept moving from one person to another. Like passing a candle instead of letting the light go out. On the drive home, I realized something painfully obvious. I had spent years searching for some dramatic sign that told me who I should build a life with. Meanwhile, life had quietly placed the answer beside me every single day. The next morning, I knocked on her apartment door carrying breakfast from her favorite diner. She opened the door wearing old sweatpants, her hair completely unbrushed. "You look terrible," I joked. "I've been awake for 30 hours. "I know." She laughed softly. "What brings you here?" I took a deep breath. "You remember what you said at the grocery store?" She immediately looked nervous. "You don't have to answer if." "I do." She fell silent. I continued. "You said whether you'd stay single forever depended on me." She nodded. "It does. I've been thinking about that every minute since." Her eyes searched mine. I kept asking myself why I never saw what everyone else apparently did. She blinked. "Everyone else?" "My sister thought we were dating." Emily laughed. "My librarian coworkers thought so too." "My neighbor asked if we were engaged." She covered her face. "Oh no." And honestly. I smiled. "I think the only 2 people who didn't know were us." She lowered her hands. So I realized something." "What?" "I don't want to imagine another birthday without you there." She stayed perfectly still. "I don't want to celebrate good news with anyone else first." Tears began filling her eyes. "I don't want another storm, another holiday, another random Tuesday unless you're part of it." She whispered, "Ryan. I teased you about being single forever." I stepped closer. "The truth is." I laughed nervously. "I think I was the one taking forever." For a second she simply stared at me. Then she did something beautifully unexpected. She punched my arm. Not hard. Just enough to make me laugh. "You are unbelievably slow," she said through tears. "I've been told." She wrapped her arms around me. I held her as morning sunlight poured through the apartment windows. No dramatic music. No audience. Just 2 ordinary people finally saying what had been true for years. Months later, we organized a neighborhood fundraiser instead of throwing ourselves an expensive engagement party. Emily insisted every dollar beyond the food costs should go toward rebuilding homes damaged by the storm. Friends protested. This is your celebration. Emily smiled. It is. Then let people celebrate you. They are. How? She looked around the crowded community hall where volunteers, firefighters, teachers, retirees, teenagers, and families laughed together. Love grows faster when everyone gets a piece of it. That night we raised enough money to repair 3 homes. An elderly widow hugged Emily so tightly that neither of them could stop crying. Driving home, I glanced at the woman sitting beside me. The woman I almost overlooked because I was waiting for fireworks instead of paying attention to quiet goodness. Life rarely changes because of grand speeches. More often, it changes because someone hands you a cup of coffee when your world falls apart. Because someone remembers your birthday. Because someone helps strangers without expecting applause. Because someone believes kindness should never stop with them. Years later, our children would ask how we fell in love. They always expected an exciting story. I'd smile every time. It started with a joke. Emily would roll her eyes. It started because your father was hopeless. Our kids would laugh. Then I'd take her hand and finish the story the same way every single time. I once told your mom she'd stay single forever. Emily would grin. And I told him that depended on him. She was right. It did. And saying yes to the kindest person I had ever known wasn't just the best decision of my life. It became the beginning of every good thing that followed.